So first off, I just want to thank everybody for signing in for this today. It's great to have a captive audience to be able to share this information. I know a lot of people always ask about this, but there's never enough time during the school day to work on it. So here's a chance for us to talk a little bit more about devices. So I'm going to start off by sharing my screen so you can see my little presentation here. Hopefully everything agrees. Hopefully you should be seeing my screen right now with all about AAC. I'm gonna go through and mute a few more people. Okay. All right. So the little screen that says all about AAC. That's what we're going to be talking about today. For the first half hour, we're going to talk about what it is and how we can implement it with our students. And the last, we're going to, I'm going to share my iPad with you guys so you can actually see several of the apps in action. So if anyone has any questions throughout the presentation, there's that chat box in the upper corner. So please just feel free to drop questions there as you think of things. If you're popping in after we've already started, please just drop your name in the chat box also so I can make sure I count your attendance. So let's get started. So from this presentation, you're going to learn about what it is, who uses it, the different types, and why it's so important. So the first thing is we should know about what is it. So AAC is augmentative and alternative communication. The augmentatives, it talks about for students who have some verbal speech, but it's not enough to get all their needs met. So what it does, it helps supplement what speech or little speech they do have so they're better able to communicate. The second type is the alternative. These are kids that may never speak or will have lacked the ability to have any speech, and this will be an alternative to using verbal speech. So there's all different types of AAC. It doesn't have to be devices. It can also be communication books. It can be PECs. It could be communication boards. So those are low-tech options. And then you also do have the higher tech options like an iPad or what's called a dedicated communication device. Those are the devices from companies like Saltillo and Dynavox and Tobii. These are companies that make devices specifically for communication and no other purposes. And that's the reason why insurance and Medicaid will cover those types of devices, because it's dedicated. It can't do anything but help a student communicate. Okay, so who can use it? Basically, anybody who cannot get their needs met through verbal speech. So if they can't verbally communicate everything they want to, they could benefit from some type of AAC. There's several tiers of devices. So the tier 1 would be students who have no speech at all. So those are those alternatives I talked about. Have no ability to speak, and this is going to be their option for speaking. Sorry. No. Okay. The second tier is the supplemental. Again, these are the kids that have a little bit of speech, or what speech they do have is really unintelligible. And because it's so unintelligible, they need something to supplement their communication so that people can understand them. The third tier is what's the AAC breakdowns. These are kids that are actually fairly verbal. They can have most of their needs met, but once in a while there's breakdowns, and whether it's frustration or other deficits that make them have trouble communicating, it's that backup to help them communicate in those specific situations. I like to think of it as like Linus with the security blanket. It's there when they need it, but they don't need it all the time. But it's there to help them for those moments that they do. And the last tier is for academics. So those are kids that, again, could be fairly verbal in their speech and they can communicate fairly well. They just need some help in organizing their language to be a little bit more fluent. So communication is a fundamental human right. Everybody has the right to some form of communication. To implement it, we need a couple of different steps. The first is just the basics. You need to know what the device is or the system is, so that way you can help the student use it. The second component is access. They need to have access to their device all the time. They may use different modes in different situations, and that's okay too. So they may use their iPad-based device throughout their school day, but then maybe when they use the bathroom, they have a communication board. So that way, depending on the situation, they can use a different modality But as long as they have access to something, they always need some form of consistent communication in all of their settings. The next component is modeling. It's so, so important that we teach our students how to use the devices because they're not going to pick it up right away. If you think about babies, they learn by us speaking to them. And that's the same thing with kids with devices. They're going to learn when they see us helping them use it. The next component is core vocabulary. This is really important for our students to be able to generalize the use of the device throughout their school day. And we'll get into that a little bit more later on. The last part is opportunities. If you have nothing to say, you're not going to communicate. We need to give them opportunities for something to talk about. So how do we intervene with students with AAC? I always go back to whatever you would do with a verbal child is what we're going to do with a student with a device. When it comes to babies, we talk to them. We don't expect them to answer us right away, but we still talk to them in full sentences. And that's what we're doing for our students with devices. We want to model for them. We want to give them as many exposures to language as we can. So there's a lot of myths when it comes to AAC. The first one is I should start with something small and easy system and then build my way up. And that's not necessarily the case. When I'm looking at a student, when I'm evaluating them, I want to see where is the student at right now and what can they do. There's some students that can jump right into a high-tech device immediately. So there's no reason to start at something low and build up. We have to just start wherever the student's capabilities are. The next myth is we should limit the number of words in the system based on their cognitive level. It's really hard to assess a student's true cognitive level, especially if they're nonverbal. So we don't want to deny them access to words because we don't think they can handle them. We want to give them as much exposure to as much language as they can do. And we'd be surprised with what they can do if we give them a lot more access. The third myth is that we should program new and relevant vocabulary into a system for each unit or make separate boards for unique activities. And that's kind of how we've always done devices in the past, and that's what I've done for years. But now I'm really starting to switch up how I think about devices. When we spend all this time putting in vocabulary for a very specific lesson, they may only use it for that lesson, and it's not relevant to the rest of their lives. So they're not using that vocabulary over and over again. So it's not really the most efficient use of, if I only have 30 minutes to program, I really want to focus on what's going to be really effective for them. What are they going to use so much more throughout their day? And we're going to get into that again when it comes to core vocabulary. But one of the examples I like to use is outer space. So if we're having a solar system unit in class, I could spend a half hour and put in Mars and orbit and astronaut and all these very specific outer space words. But after that unit's over, how often are they going to use those words or need those words again? It's not that they don't need those words for that unit, which are important, but in terms of what's on the device and what we're training them on, we want to think about what's going to be really effective for them. So we do something where I called like flip the script. So instead of asking who flies in a spaceship and the answer being astronaut, what if I changed how I worded the question and did, what does an astronaut do? Well, I can use my core words and say, he flies, or maybe like he flies space. Those are words he's going to use again, because I can take that same phrase and change a different question and put in, well, what's a pilot? Well, he flies, but he flies sky. And now we're using words that are going to be more familiar to them, things that are going to be in their environment. And now I can take that same phrase again and talk about animals, and I could talk about birds, because instead of he flies, it's going to be it flies sky. So now we're giving them a lot of opportunities to use words over again in multiple situations. The next myth is that we need to, you need to show good behavior to earn your communication system. I know this is hard because we have a lot of kids with a lot of tough behaviors, but we also have a lot of kids with tough behaviors who are verbal, and they're not being denied their communication because they're verbal. So we really can't deny communication to students because they're nonverbal and they're engaging in behaviors. That doesn't mean that we're going to give a kid an expensive device if they're constantly throwing against a wall. What we need to do is look at what's going on with the behavior, and is there another form of communication we can give them in lieu of a device that can get broken? Maybe we look at a communication binder or a booklet. May not be as motivating for the student, but maybe that will be part of what helps them control their behavior, because they want to be able to use the more efficient, more motivating iPad type device. But we don't want to have them without any form of communication. We're going to give them something, but we have to look at the parameters of the student. And a lot of times when students are acting out, it's because they don't have the communication to get their needs met in appropriate ways. So we have to look at it really case by case and how we can best suit the needs of the student. The last one is we shouldn't introduce a system if we want the student to talk verbally, because it's going to slow them down. So all the research out there, everything that they've done, and they've done a lot of research on communication devices, they found that's not the case. In no study have they ever found that an AAC system stopped or slowed down verbal speech. In fact, the opposite is true. So if a student is able to be verbal, it's always going to be easier. Verbal speech is always going to be an easier way to do it than looking on a screen for their words. So if they have the capability for verbal speech, that's what's going to show up. But if they don't, we do need to give them something to help support their language. What they found is students with devices that have the potential to be verbal become more verbal because now their frustrations are lower because they're getting their needs met more efficiently. And they're also hearing a consistent model. Now, the way I say ball is going to be different than someone from Georgia who says ball versus somebody else who says ball, because our pitch is going to be different. Our intonation is going to be different. Our accent is going to be different. The device says the word ball the same way every single time. They're getting a consistent model, and they're more likely to learn how to say the words from the device compared to hearing it from another person. So access, they need to have access to communication at all times. They should never be taken away, because it's like taking away their voice. And if they are engaging in behaviors, you always want to ask the question, what would I do if this student was verbal? And how would I react to that behavior? And if you take nothing else away from this, that's one thing I would always want people to kind of think in the back of their head. If they're doing something, how would I react if the student was verbal? What kind of behavior interventions would I put into place if they were verbal? And try to apply the same way to the student with the device. So again, this is just reiterating why access is so really important. They need to see it as their voice. They need to buy into the idea that this is going to meet my needs. So some frequently asked questions. Again, what do we do if a student drops or throws their AAC system? I know it's hard. We do have kids with really challenging behaviors, but on one side, the cases are generally very strong and sturdy. It doesn't mean that they're not impossible to break, because they have, but they're usually generally pretty secure. We want to look at what's causing the student's behavior for why they are throwing the system. Is it they're just mad in general, or is it something about the device is frustrating them? Is it too hard or too easy? And the other component, which I know people are nervous about, is, am I going to be held liable if a student breaks their device? And the answer is no. For the most part, if the student has a device through medicated insurance, there's safeguards in place in terms of warranty for replacing devices. It's owned by the district. Again, we can work with the district for getting replacements. The only time staff could really be held liable if they intentionally, meaning the staff person, wreck the device. If I took someone's device and I personally threw it against the wall to break it, that would be a different situation. But for the most time, if our students are breaking a device, they're accidents. It was on someone's desk and the desk got bumped into and it fell and broke. Or another student was having a negative behavior and caused the device to break. Accidents happen, and we have safeguards in place to do replacements when they're needed. What if I go somewhere like the pool where I can't bring a device? Obviously, we're not putting an iPad into a swimming pool. We're not putting an iPad if they were taking a shower, if they were home. There's some places you're not going to bring their device, but there are alternatives. Like I talked about the multimodalities. So maybe we can make a communication board and laminate it so they could have it in the pool with them, or just find another system for them. We have a student with eye gaze devices, and they're mounted, they're big, they can't fit into the bathroom stall with it. So obviously, no, we're not gonna have the device in the stall with them, but maybe we could have a choice board where they could activate it, that a yes or no, something simple so they can still communicate even when they're in different situations. What should I do if others don't see the importance of using the device? And that's really what you guys are doing today, is education. Educate your coworkers, educate your families, let them know why this can be so important for our students. When you see the importance of it and the student sees the importance of it, it's going to get used much more. What do we do if a student stims on the device or they feel like they're just playing with it? really what I think of it when they're playing with a device like that in the early stages, it's babbling. It's what babies do. If they learn to talk, they're doing da, ka, ka. Like they're just throwing sounds out there. They're seeing how it feels. They're seeing how things get put together. And then we're helping them by applying those random sounds and shaping them into real language. When I hear a baby say ba ba ba, I'm like, oh, you want your bottle? You must be hungry. I'm applying language to something they're randomly saying. And then they start to make the connection. Oh, when I make this sound, this thing happens. And that's what we need to do with the students, with their devices. So again, I like the analogies. So if you took a verbal student, it would be the same thing as putting duct tape on their mouth to take someone's device or communication system away. You don't want to take it away, but you can redirect it. So again, what would you do if they were a student? If the student was verbal, if they're verbal and TV talking, that's their STEM. What do? We stop them, we redirect them, we move forward. And the same thing with the devices. So if they're stimming on a button over and over and over again, we say, okay, slide the device to the side, hands down, redirect them, bring the device back. What did you want to say? And just try to minimize that behavior. Because obviously if they've had their device for 5 or 6 years and they're tapping on a button over and over again, it's a behavior, it's a STEM. So we want to redirect it and reshape the behavior into something more appropriate. And again, for every rule, there's always going to be exceptions. We have had students where, almost rarely take a device away. But for this one particular student, it was just increasing her behaviors so acutely that it was just not effective for her anymore. And we had to resort to some more low-tech options because the device was just too overstimulating. So again, there's always exceptions. There's always a case by case. But overall, you always want to give a child a chance to communicate. Again, I like analogies. So if we had a student with really poor vision and they had very expensive glasses, we wouldn't tell them, okay, we're watching a movie in the auditorium. Leave your glasses in your desk because we don't want them to break. We would never do that. We would have them wear their glasses because they need to see. They said, well, if we bring their communication device to an auditorium, to an assembly, they're going to be disruptive and be hitting buttons and disrupt the assembly. Yeah, but we have verbal kids who are verbal and disrupt the assemblies. What do we do with those verbal kids? We tell them to be quiet. We teach them when it's appropriate to speak and when it's not appropriate. We need to do the same thing with the devices, when it's appropriate for it and when it's not appropriate. And the last analogy I'm going to throw out for this part is an English-German dictionary. If I handed you that English-German dictionary, you're not going to be fluent in German. But all I did was give you tool to language. I gave you access to language. But someone needs to show you how to use it. And that's what these devices are. They're access to language. We need to be the ones to teach them how to use it. And again, if I had a German teacher for, 30 minutes a day, twice a week, like my speech sessions, I'll pick up a little more German. But how much more German would I learn if I had someone sitting next to me speaking German all day long and translating? I'm going to learn a lot more because I have that model going on all day long. Presume competence. We truly do not know everything our students know who are nonverbal. We don't know what they're absorbing. We don't know what their understanding of the things we say to them. We have to assume that they do understand everything we say. So we do need to assume that if we're talking in front of them, that they're getting it. So we would never want to do and say things in front of students that are nonverbal that we wouldn't do in front of a verbal student who could repeat at home. So with that being said, we want to make sure that they're understanding us, that we're just going to keep talking to them, and eventually they're going to use those models to hopefully move forward and be using the device more effectively. One example is a Strive student I had years ago who loved to repeat letters and numbers. He would use all day long these letters and numbers over and over and over again. And finally, when he was maybe 9 or 10, his mom decided to write them down, just see if there was any meaning behind them. And when she looked at the letters and number combination, she realized it was their license plate. Which, okay, that wouldn't be too unusual, except they sold that car when he was 1 year old. So at 1 year old, he picked up on those letters and numbers and they stuck with him. So we never really know truly what our kids are absorbing and learning. And we always want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Okay, modeling, it's Thursday. It's good to look at something fun. So it's so important to model our students. It's important that they know how to use their device and be able to use it as much throughout their day. Okay, when it comes to modeling, by 18 months old, babies have heard 4,380 hours of spoken language, and we don't expect them to be fluent. Now, if a device user got speech twice a week for 30 minutes, it would take them 84 years to catch up to the 18-month-old in terms of exposure to language. So that's why it's really so important that throughout their whole day, they're getting as much exposure as possible. All right, so some tips. Don't worry about mistakes. Mistakes are our friend. We like mistakes, whether it's them or us with the devices. If a student makes a mistake on a device, like you know they want a ball, they're looking at it, they're reaching for it, and they go to their device and they say, I want book. And then you give them a book because that's what they said. Now you just taught them the cause and effect. You taught them if they say book, they're getting a book, they're not getting the ball. And it gives them a chance for them to also say, no, that's not what I want ball. And now they've corrected it. Now they've learned like 3 words right there. So again, mistakes are really good opportunities for them to learn new words. And mistakes are also good for you too, to also learn where things are on the device. Start small. Some of our devices have like 60 buttons a page. Don't feel like you have to use all 60 buttons every single day, every single moment. Pick a couple that you'd like to try a target and then really power through with those and use those in lots of instances. Involve friends and peers. Again, if we have other students in the class with devices, what great opportunities for them to model with each other. Don't expect a response. Again, we're modeling and they may not respond right away, but we're hoping the more we model, the more they're going to pick up on the use of the device. Have a print copy. This is really important for 2 reasons. When you're modeling, it's great to have a print copy so you can model on your board and they can model on their device. The other great reason for it is, like I said, devices sometimes do get broken. They need software updates. They need things where they're going to be out of the student's reach. And in those instances, it's great to be able to have a printed backup of their device so that way they're not without communication. Stick to keywords. Again, this goes back to the core vocabulary. We're going to get into that. But again, by focusing on simple words that they can use throughout their day, it's going to help generalize into so many more environments. And the last thing is make it fun. If anyone's ever seen me with my students when I'm doing speech therapy with the device kid, I'm silly, I'm ridiculous, I'm trying to make them laugh. It needs to be fun. It needs to be motivating. If they see it that this is just a test, that they have to hit a few buttons and then they're done with me, they're not learning. They're just learning a task for that moment and it's not going to generalize. If they like cars, start there. If they like dolls, start there. Start whatever's motivating so that they start seeing, I can get things that I want, that I really do want from this thing. It's going to help make my world better. Again, teach less and teach more and test less. Again, if they say like, find this, show me this, at the end of it, it's boring. Like you want to make it a little bit more engaging, vary up the phrases, give them different things to talk about. When they're just labeling vocabulary, then they get stuck in it. I have one student who can find any device, any word on that device. There's 100 words. I show her 100 cards. She can find them instantly, but she can't tell you if she's in pain. She can't tell you if she's happy about something. All she can do is label because we never really got past, we got it stuck too much as a test. Like this is just something where I label things and I don't do anything else. So it's really hard to break that cycle if they've been in that cycle for too long. Okay. The +1 technique. So basically, if they can do 1 word really consistently, throw in 2. And if they can do 2, throw in 3. So it's not just about, you know, stop, but stop that. Or look that. Wow, look that. Now we're putting all these more exciting things into very simple words. Okay, here's another way of example of having that printout copy. Make a small version of it, stick it on your lanyard, stick it on a keychain. That way, no matter where you are in the building, you have an opportunity to model for them. So again, take a look at simple words we can combine together that have a lot of powerful to it. Like saying, go away. That's really powerful. That gives them a lot of control in their environment. And then again, we start building it from 2 words, build it to 3. When you got 3, build it to 4. And what you're noticing on these core words that you're seeing, there's not a lot of nouns. There are verbs, there are pronouns, there's some prepositions, but you're not seeing a lot of nouns because nouns are not what we speak in most of the day. If you think about what we say in terms of individual words, there's not a lot of nouns going on there. So these are the words that are going to be much more powerful for our students. Okay, which brings us right into core vocabulary. So core vocabulary is a small set of words that make up 80% of what we say. So again, why it's so important. If you have these small words that are really powerful, they're going to be able to use it so much more throughout their day. I mean, I could teach the word astronaut, but they're not going to be using astronaut all day long. But if I teach go, those are a word they can use a lot. If I teach stop, there's a word they can use a lot. You know, there's so many more powerful words out there for them that's going to be more effective. So again, here's some examples of some really great core words. Off, no, want, you, in, on. These are all great words that they can use throughout their day. So there was a study in 2003, and they took a whole bunch of toddlers, put them in a room, and they did language samples where they spent a day with them and wrote down every single word that came out of their mouths. So when the study was over, they found that these 23 words made up 96.3% of all the words that those toddlers spoke. So again, you're not seeing the color red, you're not seeing community helpers, you're not seeing shapes. These are the words that they're speaking most of their day. Why most of us tend to put those other nouns into devices is they are concrete. I can have red. I know what red looks like. I know what an icon of red should look like. If I have a shape of a circle, I know what circle looks like. It's very concrete. It's cause, effect. It's really good to start with. You know, the word the. There's really no icon to go with the, but the has a lot of versatility. Same thing even with yes and no. We sometimes put like the smiley face or the sad face for yes and no, but yes and no are not sad and happy words. You know, it depends on how you're applying it. So they're not really good for icons, but they're so powerful for their language. And that's what we need to focus on. Okay. So again, talking about core language is really requiring, encouraging but not requiring communication. Let their interest be the lead for when you're working with them. And the words on the device should be the words that you expect them to say. It's not what we say to them. Like someone had asked me, oh, can we put sit down on their device? I said, we could, if you expect that that child's going to tell an adult to go sit down. And that's fine. It's not that what we want to say to them, it's what we want them to say to us. Again, thinking in core is going to give them more opportunities to communicate throughout the day. So here's an example of the word go. Simple, 2 letters, very powerful. You can say during transition times, go home, go to school, go out the door. You can have wind-up toys and make them go. We're in the wagon down the hallway. We're making it go. We're going down the slide. We're make the bike go in the hallway. We've got reading books that have to do with go. We could do social activities with wheels on the bus. We can do red light, green light, and do stop and go. So there's just all these opportunities for them to learn to use this word throughout their whole day. Okay, here's an example of a core board. So it has a lot of language that's going to be very powerful for them. So communication opportunities. Research shows that a student needs 200 opportunities every day to become, to master their device and become fluent with it. So in a speech session for 30 minutes, we could probably get a good 40 to 50 opportunities if the kid's really on task. But that really means they still have so many more chances they need to do it throughout their day besides just in the speech session. So this comes up a lot. Requesting is really where we start with a lot of our students because it's concrete and it's cause and effect. They ask for a ball, they get a ball. They ask to go to the bathroom, we take them to the bathroom. They ask for water, we give them water. Cause, effect, very concrete, works for our students. But there's so much more out there. We want them, you know, can they tell a joke? Can they express their feelings? Can they start a conversation? Can they tell somebody about something cool they see? The one that I really like is complain. Our kids need to be able to complain. It's a natural form of communication. They should be able to let people know that something's bothering them or they don't like the movie that's on and they want to watch something different. We had one student who used her device within the first week because she had her AFOs on and she said, leg, ouch, because she wanted to let you know that and it turned out her brace was on incorrectly and it was hurting her foot. She should have the right to complain. And without the device, some of our kids will just go into negative behavior or cry or do something else because they have no other way to tell us that something's wrong. So again, think about if you've ever had laryngitis. I have. Everyone who knows me, I'm a talker. So to not be able to talk for like a week was painful. I can't imagine what it must be like for students who go their whole lives and not be able to verbally communicate with somebody else, to let people know when they're sick, to let someone know that they need help, or just if they think something was really funny, just be able to express all those ideas. So having a communication device doesn't make you an effective communicator any more than a piano makes you a musician. And I can attest to that. I had music lessons for years. I had a piano in my house. I'm still not a musician. All a piano is a tool to make music, and the devices are tools to communicate. They still need to be taught. They need to be practiced. Okay, devices, what everybody wants to know about. So the one device that a good portion of our students have is called TouchChat. There are 3 levels of it. So you have TouchChat Lite. It has all the capabilities and all the boards of the other versions, but there's no voice output. Now, this is the kid that we talk about Linus in the security blanket. They don't need it for all their communication because they are verbal. They just need that backup. They may need that visual prompt. They may need that visual script to do what they need to do. So it's just there for support, but it doesn't have to be their entire world. The next level is called just TouchChat. And this one, most of our students have this vocabulary down here called multi-chat 15. It's very phrase-based. It goes from one phrase to another, not a lot of broken down to individual words. So again, depending on the student, it's what's best for them. And that app goes for about $150. And then the larger version is called TouchChat with Word Power. You'll see a lot of our students with this as well. And that one's more expensive. It's like $300. But again, you're thinking about this is their entire form of communication. We're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of words that they have access to at the touch of their fingers. What Word Power is, it's a little bit different. It does focus very hard on core language, and it also works on grammar prediction. So you're trying to construct more fluent sentences with it. The next app is called Proloquo to Go. This was pretty much the first big communication app out on the market. It was invented by a parent and not a speech therapist. Not to knock the parents, but it wasn't necessarily designed with language development in mind. Over the years, they have modified it, and it looks a little bit more like some of the other apps you see out there. My opinion, it's a little bit harder to program, so it's not as easy as some of the other ones. But we do have students who have it, and if they have it, we work with it, and we make it work for them. So it has a bunch of little features here and there that are better or worse than some of the other ones out there. The next one is Go Talk Now. You may be familiar with the word Go Talk if you see the kids with the green hard devices that have the boards that slide in and slide out. Well, that company also made an app version. It's a bit cheaper than the other ones, around $80, but it doesn't have a lot of pre-programmed boards. You have to put in a lot of the boards in there or pay money for additional boards to be uploaded. So that's where the money kind of flips in there. But again, depending on the student, it may be appropriate for them or not. We have to kind of look at what each app does and what each student needs. Okay, LAMP. Whew. This one took me a long time to get into. It's a little intimidating. If you see some of the pictures on there already, it's very different than any other app that most of our students work with. LAMP stands for Language Acquisition Through Motor Planning. The idea behind it is their feeling is the visuals don't matter. What you're doing is teaching them a motor plan, a position of where your hands are going to learn where buttons are. And there's probably about 5,000 words in the system, and you can hit any one of those 5,000 words within 3 hits. So there's definitely some benefits to that for some of our students. Again, it's very intimidating. I was intimidated, not gonna lie. If you look at some of the buttons there, like the word for do is a finger with a string around it. Not what I would naturally think of as what we would do for a word for do, but then again, whatever it is, they've kind of went with it and they are going with their system. Some of the other unusual ones is a dog with a newspaper in its mouth, and that's the word come, which, I could kind of get, you have a dog come here, and, so maybe that's where they're going with it. And like the bathtub that you see on the screen is the word help. Again, not what I naturally would assume for the button, but their feeling again is that the pictures don't matter. It's all about teaching the motor plan. It's teaching where their hands should go to select each button, and that will speed their accuracy and be able to build up sentences. And I have seen students do amazingly well with it. So like I'm no longer knocking it like I used to. Part of it too, though, is there's almost no programming to it. The buttons are in the locations they are because of the specific motor plan you're trying to teach a student. So things don't get moved. The buttons are not changed in different sizes. The pages pretty much are what they are. The one thing you can do is hide some buttons and then train those and then bring them back out, which I'll show you in a few minutes. So like I said, it's a little intimidating at first, but it's more intimidating for us than it is for the students. I've seen students pick up on it really quickly. Okay. And then some of our lower tech and mid tech stuff. So we have some students that use switches where they tap the button and it says a single word or may say a phrase, or it may tap a button and it activates something, meaning it turns like a toy on or something like that. The second kind is what a lot of students have our Go Talks. So the limitation to these are you're stuck to only 5 levels. So if you have a Go Talk 20, you've got 100 words, and that's what you're limiting their entire vocabulary to, which sounds like a lot, but when you're talking about all the words they say throughout their day, it does have some limitations to it. For me, I've also kind of navigated away from, again, putting a lot of nouns on there. I try to put on a lot more verbs and prepositions so that they can use one board throughout a lot of instances instead of just one specific session or one specific lesson. Something I also like to do with those devices is I want to go with the smallest button they can do. So I could start with a Go Talk 4 and then say if the lower corner is the button for bathroom. Okay, well, they did that really well. Now I'm going to go to a Go Talk 9. Okay, well, now I have to change where the button is because now I have 9 buttons. So now bathroom is in a different spot. So I'm changing the motor plan on them. And then I go to 20 and I'm doing it again. It's like starting from scratch each time. Now, if I think a student can handle a button as small as the Go Talk 20, but they can't handle too many buttons, then I'll take the 4 corners and put a word in each of those. And then as they learn more words, I'll just add more buttons in, but I'm not changing the motor plan for those original words that I've added. So they become a lot more fluent with it. iPad versus Android. I know a lot of people have asked, why are most of these communication apps on iPads when Androids are so much cheaper? And the truth is that there's just too many Android devices on the market. So when a device company, these apps are huge. I mean, we're talking 10, 15 times bigger than any typical app. They can't guarantee that their communication app is going to work on every single Android device on the market. And each of those different devices, whether it's Samsung or Google or Kindle, they may do software updates at different times, which means the device company has to keep up with all their different software updates. Whereas an Apple is an Apple is an Apple. They know what apples are, they know their capability, they know it's going to work every time. They know when Apple does an update, if they have to do any modifications, it's just consistent. Mostly because, again, the apps are just way too big to be consistent across all different devices. Okay, these are just a couple of resources. One thing I like to show too, being nonverbal doesn't mean I have nothing to say. It means you need to listen to me with more than just your ears. So with that, I'm going to switch my screens again. And I'm going to show you guys my iPad, hopefully. Okay, so I'm going to switch that. If anyone's popped in since we started, if you just want to throw your name in the chat box and make sure I get your attendance. I just want to make sure I don't miss anybody. Okay, on that, look at that. Okay. All right, so hopefully in a moment, you should be seeing my iPad. We're scrolling a little bit. Come on. Okay, it worked every time until today. So hold on, let's try one more time. Of course. All right, let's see. Hang on, guys. Sorry. Like, honestly, this has worked every single session until today. All right, let me reboot this for a second. 1 second, guys. Thank you for your patience. Oh, thank goodness. Okay. So you guys should be seeing my iPad screen right now. Hopefully everybody does. So I have a couple of the main apps that are most popular. So I'll have those out for you guys to see. So the first one we're going to do is the Go Talk Now. Again, we don't have a ton of kids on it. One of the problems is you do have to do a lot of programming to make it appropriate for the students. So it does have a lot of simple things in here, but if you want anything more than this, you either need to purchase it or you need to do the programming yourself. One type of page that I do like that they have an option for is a full screen, a visual scene. So I took a picture of my basement, and what I was able to do is make everything in this picture a hotspot. So everything in here, if I touch it, it will say what it is. So hopefully you heard that. So anything I touched on the screen was going to speak. So it's a nice kind of option for some kids. If you want to take a picture of a bookshelf full of toys, you can turn each of those toys into a hotspot for it to speak. Again, not much else to say about this one, because again, it doesn't have a lot of great features for us. The second one is Proloquo. Again, it was the first one kind of out in the market. So it's had some fine tunings over the years. It does have that kind of basic, you know, being able to put some sentences together. So it's okay. Again, we have students that use it. We make it work for them. But when it comes to programming, there's no real explanation to what all these buttons do. Like I had to do a tutorial to figure out, you know, what buttons I need to do to add and subtract things. So again, it wasn't as intuitive. Like I couldn't just look at it and know what I'm supposed to do. But I was able to figure out most of the stuff, so it's not so bad. I said, it's okay. It's not the greatest one in the world, but it's certainly doable for many of our students. Let's see. Let's do LAMP. All right. Again, it's a little intimidating. I'm not going to lie. A little scary for me too. What it has is, what you're going to notice, at least in the vocabulary page, you're going to see here where there's some yellow locks and some green locks. The yellow locks mean that it's an original vocabulary page set. Means there's nothing you can do to edit that page at all. So you always have an original always saved in the system. So when you buy the app, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these 5 levels automatically come with it, already pre-programmed and set to go. What you can then do is make a copy of each of them, and then that's what you have this green lock down here. When it's a green lock, that means you can edit it, you can do what you need to for that particular student. It comes in 3 levels. So you have one hit, transition, and full. So start with the one hit, and one hit is exactly what it sounds like. You hit something one time, and it says the word. So you're just limited to the 84 buttons you see directly on this screen. Everything you touch just speaks. Pretty self-explanatory there. Then I go back into the vocab, and then I can change it to transition. Now that they've got that, now you're going to see the board is exactly the same as the last one. Buttons are all in the same spot, but now it takes me 2 hits to say the words. So if I hit come, I need to go back to this upper corner to actually make it say it, because we're building up what they're doing, but we haven't changed the motor plan. What you're going to notice too, when I hit, oops, get on here first. If I hit come, the verb here is in green, and it's 3 down, 3 across. That's where the location is to say the verb. Now, if I go to read, that verb is in that same exact location. If I go to go is in that same location. So if I'm going to say a verb, my hands are almost automatically going to that spot because I know that's where the verb is going to be. So it's very predictable. So again, if we go to the next level, which is full, Again, page looks exactly the same as all the other ones did. So now you're just adding more vocabulary to it. So nothing's changed for the location. So if I hit come again, come is still in that same location, but now we've added some other things here too. We've also added more animals. We've added grammatical markers for the verb come. We've added some extra, sorry about that. We've added some additional adjectives and things that would be associated with it. So, but the same thing too, but if we look to other words too, if we go to go, again, that location is still the same for the verb, and then everything else is kind of built around it. So you are building up that vocabulary for it. But it can be a little confusing too when you don't know the system immediately. Like for the word do, you have all these great action words, but it also has like jewelry and accessories. I don't really know why. That's how they set it up. So once you learn where the things are, then it does happen much faster and you are able to go through with it. So, but again, I want to let everybody see it because it is intimidating. I'm not going to lie, but it can be really, really effective for some of our students. Some of our students pick up on it super, super quickly. Okay. Last, we're just going to show touch chat because this is the one that most of our students have. What you're going to notice, again, with choosing vocabulary, this looks a whole lot like LAMP because the company that makes LAMP is a sister company to the company that makes chat. So, so the things are going to look very similar. So even the programming is almost identical. So you have the yellow locks for the basic pre-programmed things, and you have the green locks for the ones that are ones we can copy and we can edit. So in the basic version, you can have access to the 4 basic, which is 4 buttons, very simple. Which is fine. But again, when you're limited to the number of buttons per page, it's a lot more navigating for the students to have to do and a lot more remembering of where things are. So, but if that's where their visual field is, that's fine. And we work with it. But if we can get them to the smallest button they can do, it's going to give them a lot more opportunities. Also included in the base version is multi-chat. So we have a student version, an adult version, and an adolescent version. So most of our students have one. So this should look pretty familiar. We do tweak it a little bit in terms of what's on this main page, because really it's prime real estate. You want to have the most important words on that main page for our students. It is very phrase-based. So if I start with I want, it's automatically bringing me to verbs that are very common for our students. So if we go to play, and now it's bringing me to toys. It's already kind of setting up those sentences for them. But one thing I do like about it a lot is that it doesn't just say, I want to play cars. It brings me to a social page. So I want to play cars, but now it's your turn, my turn, finished. You can choose the color car you want. You can make it crash. Now they're assuming that you're engaging into play with somebody else. You're not just saying, I want cars and go play by yourself. It's already kind of prompting them that they should be doing this with somebody else. One thing you're going to notice also on the screens here is you have go back, clear, and home. And if I go to another page, clear and home are still here. If I go to another page, go back, clear, and home are here. If I go to this page, go back, clear, and home. Again, we're also feeding into that motor plan idea too. Things are in predictable locations so that they always know where they should go when they want to go home. Their body's almost automatically going to that spot because it's in a predictable location. And when things are in predictable locations, they're going to be more fluent with it. And then if the kid has word power, so we have a lot of options with word power as well. The simplest being 20 buttons per page, as high as 108 buttons. And you said that sounds overwhelming, but honestly, it's not so bad. So again, depending on the students, if they can see a button this small, I want to start there because then that's less navigation for them to constantly having to go through to find what they need. When they go to the group page, all that vocabulary is right there at their fingertips instead of having to go more, and keep navigating deeper and deeper trying to find what they need. They can access it so much faster if they can do a smaller button. So that's where we want to start wherever possible. Most of our students, however, if they have word power, they have word power 60. It's nice and versatile. It gives them some opportunities for lots of language. Again, when I talk about prime real estate, they're only going to put things on the front page that are really valuable. Now, the word am is a good word, but it's not used a lot. So it's not on this front page. But if I touch I, am now becomes an option because the system knows that I and am go together. And then if I hit am, all the verbs change to ing endings because it knows that that I am is present progressive. It knows those verbs need ing endings. So it's kind of predicting their grammar for them and helping train them on those on that grammar system. So it kind of helps along with those things as well. It has a lot of nice other little features in the group page. So they've got some books that are already put together and all the vocabulary need for those specific. So the nice thing with it, it's very little programming you have to do. If anything, the programming I do, besides getting their personal information in, is just doing hide. So if I go into hide mode, anything I touch goes gray. And then when I'm done with it, they don't have access to those words, but the words aren't deleted. So I can always bring them back whenever I need them. But for right now, they're hidden because maybe I'm training them on certain words and I don't need the extra stuff to distract them. And then I can easily bring it back. But then again, it also in terms of programming and editing is very, very intuitive. So let me just get to a blank button. So if I want to edit it, I go to edit. Simple. And then from there, I just have to touch whatever it is that I want to edit and edit the button. And then I'm just going step by step. So what's the label? What do you want the button to say on the button on the screen itself? Message. What do you want to say? You can select an image from their library, or you can import it from the camera in the device. All this other stuff is all like fonts and things like that. You don't have to worry about that stuff. And the last thing is an action. What do you want the button to do? It automatically defaults to speak the message, but they do have lots of other fun things you can make it do. You can make it navigate to another page. You can make it record a message. You can make it play a message. You can do all sorts of kind of stuff with it. And then when you hit save, and then it's done and you have your button. So it's pretty quick and easy to do, which is why so many people tend to gravitate towards this particular app because it is so easy. So that is the bulk of what I wanted to share with you guys, but I had some questions from previous sessions, so I wanted to make sure I highlighted some of those as well. So let me switch back over. So some of the questions that were asked is, can parents buy an iPad to use at school? And the answer is yes. We do have some students that do. Most districts will ask them to sign some type of liability waiver because it is their personal device. Our Touch Chat and Nova Chat, the same thing. This yes and no. The software is identical. So if you have someone with a Nova Chat device and a student with a Touch Chat, the software in it is completely identical. It's just a matter of what hardware was it put on. If it was a Nova Chat device, it means it was bought by Medicaid or insurance, and it's now a dedicated device. They can't do anything with it except communicate. It'll have a harder case. It'll have an amp that's put on the back, and you're also given lots of support with it in terms of trainers that can come in, technical support, all that. With an iPad and Touch Chat, all you're getting is an iPad and Touch Chat. So you don't have that extra support line. When it comes to training, it's me. It's not, we don't have these extra consultants to work with it. So that's kind of where the differences are, but it's just a hardware difference as opposed to a software difference. Guided access, we have lots of students that use guided access. It locks out the home button so they can't get out of the app to do other things. The biggest word of caution, though, is to make sure that you're monitoring students that have guided access. If they try to unlock it and put that passcode in and it's wrong, and they put it in and it's wrong, and they keep trying to put it in, they can end up disabling the iPad altogether, and it will have to get wiped from the beginning, and everything would have to get reloaded back in the district. So we want to avoid that situation whenever possible. One other question was, who decides who's ready for AAC? Really, any student that can't get their needs met verbally could be a candidate. And I'm willing to try anything with any student, whether it's low tech, high tech, in between combinations. Anyone who can't get their needs met, I'm willing to work with them to see what we can do for them to help boost their skills. Last one is, what's the best app? That's a hard question. I mean, I definitely lean towards Touch Chat for a lot of my students. I like the versatility. I like the easiness of it, but it's not for everybody. So really what I'm looking at is, what features does each app have and what's the need of my student? I have a student that has not only motor impairments, but also visually impaired. So he can't do a lot of apps that require touch because he doesn't have the motor control. But he also can't do an eye gaze device because he doesn't have the vision that would be necessary for it. So it turned out in his case that the Go Talk Now app, which I don't usually recommend, is appropriate for him because what Touch Chat Go has is the Go Talk Now app, what it has that's really good is auditory scanning. And it had the best auditory scanning, and that worked well for that student. So again, we have to kind of look at what features the app has, what does the student need, and where can we best match them. So it really depends on the student itself. So that's the bulk of my presentation. We've got 4 minutes left. If you have not put your name in the chat box and you're not sure if I got your attendance, please do so. So I'll make sure everybody gets their credit. If you have any questions, you can drop them there. You also all have my email. If a question comes up about a specific student you want to ask about, please feel free. And other than that, I hope you guys have a great day.